Did you know that there's 38 main breeds in Monster Rancher 2? It's a lot. Like, a lot. And we're slowly marching through our list. Can you guess who our pick for today is?
Who's that Pokemon?
It's Pikachu!
Zoom was sort of a handful because there was so many texts to talk about. Video was almost 20 minutes long. Took a while to put together. So I'm changing gears a bit today to talk about a monster with a significantly smaller array of texts. That's right, you guessed it. We're talking about Tiger today. One of the most notable things about the anime, if you ask anyone who casually remembers the show at all, is that there's a wolf named Tiger, and that this didn't make any sense. And, you know, they're right. It's actually a mistranslation of Rygar, Rygar being one of Tecmo's first big hits on the NES. People like to think that Tiger is a mistake, but a little known fact is that it's actually paying homage to how terribly Rygar's English manual was translated. Tecmo is nothing if not consistent when it comes to their horrifying localizations. Kids who played Monster Rancher 1 were introduced to Tiger as a monster not known for heavy damage, but instead one with an insurmountable speed and accuracy stat. An interesting archetype in theory, but since Monster Rancher 1 is an incredibly easy game and maxing all of a monster's stats is trivial, even in casual play, stat affinities don't actually end up mattering all that much. What you're left with is a monster with extraordinarily weak techs. Tiger was one of the absolute worst monsters in the game, but you know, it's the first game in the series, there's quirks to be worked out. So, what's the deal in Monster Rancher 2? Has he been fixed? Is he still trash? Guess we're gonna find out. Tiger doesn't actually change much thematically throughout the series, but starting with Monster Rancher 2, he gains an additional niche that was not present in Monster Rancher 1, and that's high critical hit rates. In Monster Rancher 1, your fame was the only thing that dictated your crit rate. There was also some weird stuff in the game where some attacks gain like 200% bonus damage on a crit instead of the normal 50%, and I don't know how much that was intended, but it's not really important. Point is that sharpness didn't exist as a tech attribute, so it was an even playing field for every monster. He still excels in skill and speed and has rough defensive stats otherwise. He's got a lower than average lifespan and a fast guts regeneration rate along with high intelligence, so at first look he seems pretty similar in archetype to Pixie. The two monsters don't actually have a lot in common outside of their surface level similarities though, which is a testament to how strong and varied the character design in this game can be when it's at its best. But like we know by now, stat affinities don't really dictate a monster's playstyle in competitive play in Monster Rancher 2 either, and Tiger is just as much at home running a tank build as he is running a standard speed-based build. Combining with a Pixie maxes out Tiger's guts rate at 8, which may seem like a negligible advantage over 9, but the lower your frames per gut ratio gets, the bigger and more noticeable the incremental differences are. The jump from 9 to 8 is significantly better than the jump from 19 to 18. With an 8 guts rate, you can choose to go all in on your life and defense and take full advantage of anger, which not only cranks up your guts rate by 50%, but also doubles your withering. And, as we'll get to later, Tiger's got a decent selection of techs with powerful withering. The exceptionally high crit rates that Tiger has across all of his techs is there to offset the otherwise low damage potential most of his kit has. While casually it's implied that you should focus on intelligence over power with Tiger, he has a well-balanced mix of stuff going on, and competent builds on both attacking fronts. Although they're all pretty specialized and have big blind spots in their matchup spreads. Tiger's basic techs are pretty crappy, but this is universally true for all monsters with quick guts rates. Bite is weak and has an average chance to hit, but it also has a small amount of natural sharpness, which is pretty rare for basic techs, so it's not all bad. There's not a lot to talk about here, it's just a weak chip tech that's usable when your Tiger has power procced, but you should probably avoid it otherwise. Claw is more of the same, albeit a bit cheaper and significantly less accurate. Tiger has a really interesting distinction from other monsters in that both of his basics have the exact same force. This is really rare and unfortunately leads to Bite outclassing Claw in usefulness, even including the extra cost. If you're using Tiger's basics, it's because you're desperate for quick damage, and a minus 4% hit isn't what you're looking for. 1-2 is a pretty weak heavy tech at only 19 force, but it patches this up with 20 sharpness. To use my previous videos as an example, this move is similar in utility to Zoom's Bite and Pixie's Flame, but it really requires the crit to proc often to make it worth the cost. The move isn't fantastic, but its best quality is covering up Claw, which is otherwise useless. At least with 1-2 you get options. Combination is Tiger's other heavy tech and it lives up to that distinction. Good damage for the cost and extremely inaccurate. This is usually the type of tech you can expect to pick up from Mandy. It also has a ton of sharpness, which is really rare for heavy techs, meaning that the risk of the minus 13 hit is offset a decent amount by its relatively low cost and the pretty common chance for extra burst damage through a crit. You can make an argument that this move does what 1-2 does, only better, so it's a shame you have to get 1-2 first to unlock combination. Wait, what? I'm being informed by my producer that Tiger doesn't actually have any tech chains. That's right. Tiger has exactly 0 tech chains, a distinction he shares with Suezo and Joker and nobody else. If you want combination but not 1-2, you can absolutely get only combination and not 1-2. On errantry, each tech has its own priority and requirements, meaning under normal gameplay conditions you will always get 1-2 first, but if you don't actually meet the requirements for either tech, in this case you'd need less than 150 combined power and loyalty, so good luck with that, you've got about a 3% chance to get combination or 1-2. It's not likely and you'll have to re-roll a lot, but that's how we play the game. So you got yourself some heavy techs and need a few accurate chip techs to round out your build. What's Tiger got for you? Charge is incredibly accurate and has a really good chance to crit, but it does no damage. It's really cheap and has a fast animation, so when combined with its small amount of withering can be spammed to secure a lead, especially on close games as the timer runs out, but I cannot stress how garbage the damage is. The move only has a solid niche versus monsters that are extremely quick and have no defense. Luckily for Tiger, this is how the vast majority of the monsters operate in the 4-stat meta, but even then you'd be lucky to consistently break 3-digit damage. It's a long, slow march to the finish line with charge, during which your opponent gets opportunities to blow you up and undo all that progress. So charge isn't great, but back in the 4th slot, Tiger has another hit tech, one that does more damage and is also unexplainably more accurate somehow. Roll Assault has an obscene plus 21% hit, meaning you have a 71% chance to hit a monster with max speed if you also have max skill, not accounting for guts correction. But it actually only has one more force than charge, which is negligible gain all things considered, and Roll Assault is just a fucking nonsense move to have in slot 4. Let me break it down. Roll Assault is what we in the business like to call a grit killer. If your opponent has a very small amount of life remaining, say they procced grit, and they're slowly positioning themselves to make a comeback, Roll Assault shines as a way to kibosh their efforts and confirm the victory. It's not cheap, but that doesn't matter if it's the last move used in the battle, and when you don't need to do much damage, accuracy is all you need. Being in slot 4 means Tiger will often open the battle with Roll Assault, which I cannot stress enough, does no damage. This tech would probably be its strongest in slot 2, a slot that monsters don't spend much time in and very rarely open a match with. But when you're building a monster, you play with the hand you're dealt, and Tiger was dealt an exceptionally specialized hand. Just like Charge, this move does very well versus speedy monsters, but is often worse than not actually attacking at all when you're fighting tanks. So Tiger's not without its flaws on the power side. He wasn't designed around having really damaging techs, and this proves it, but he's got one more power tech and it's here to buck the trend. Stab is an incredibly powerful tech. As Tiger's only special tech, it excels in everything, which is what you'd hope for from a special tech. Good damage, passable accuracy, enough withering to be irritating, and an extremely high chance to crit for only 45 guts. This tech is the reason you run a Power Tiger, and single-handedly keeps the build above water. There are no real downsides to Stab outside of its cost, but even then it's efficient. If you win a match with Power Tiger, I guarantee this move will have played a part. Whereas his heavy techs and hit techs only work versus certain builds, Stab mauls everyone equally. But if you've watched the anime, you're probably assuming the bulk of his strength comes from his intelligence techs. While, spoiler alert, nothing really reaches Stab in all-around good stuff, his intelligence side does have its own uses. Bolt is Tiger's weakest intelligence tech and focuses mostly on withering. This move isn't reliable damage output and it's a bit inaccurate, but for only 18 guts and an incredibly quick animation window, the withering can be debilitating. Bolt can win games on its own just by locking out opponents, especially if the match opens with a costly miss from the opponent. Unfortunately, it's in the same slot as a power basic tech, so Bolt is a necessary pickup on all intelligence builds, even if you're not too thrilled with the numbers and playstyle. Lightning is an easy to understand progression from Bolt. It's a bit more costly, but you get slightly more damage, way more withering, and comparable hit and sharpness. Note that the animation time on a successful hit is about twice as long as that of Bolt, meaning that the extreme withering is offset by quite a bit. Just like Bolt, this is a necessary pickup because it covers Claw, regardless of its faults. Tiger has high sharpness on everything, so his sharp techs are probably insane, right? I mean, yeah. Yeah, they are. Tiger's sharp techs really play into this whole theme of constant crits, for better or for worse. Ice Bomb is comparable to Stab in just how good it is for the cost. 15 damage for 15 cost and a comically high 30 sharpness make it the single most cost-efficient sharp tech in the entire game. Now, as we've talked about previously, a high chance to crit on an otherwise weak tech doesn't mean a lot, but when you factor in the extra 20% crit chance you can get from Fame and the bad-natured stress bonus, you're going to crit 1 out of every 2 attacks, which is absurd. A 22 force tech with decent accuracy for 15 guts would be great on any monster, let alone a monster with a 9 guts rate. For comparison, Golem's Slap has 22 force and 3 extra % chance to hit, but costs 17 guts, and Golem recovers guts at half the rate of Tiger. Slap isn't Golem's best tech, but it's pretty solid otherwise, so this really illustrates how absurd Ice Bomb is when it's proccing crits. This is Tiger's only non-basic tech that doesn't wither, but it's strong enough without it. Blizzard is Ice Bomb's big brother, but it's sort of like the loser big brother who asks to hang out with the younger brother's friends. It's not that it's particularly bad, it's just not as cool as Ice Bomb. 32 is a lot of guts to spend on a tech with only 20 force. 35 sharpness is a god level critical hit chance, so it mitigates the otherwise low damaging utility of Blizzard, but it really just struggles to live up to the hype of Ice Bomb. Blizzard can be a decent opener, but it's sort of matchup dependent. Just like with Roll Assault, this move loses a lot of its usefulness versus tanks. But if beating tanks is your target, Tiger's last tech is what you're looking for. Roar has some of the heaviest withering in the entire game, and it still does a decent amount of damage for its cost. The big downside is its pitiful minus 15% hit, which puts it in line with some of the most inaccurate gamble-centric techs in the entire game. But there's a reason for that. A round opening Roar in conjunction with a steady assault from Bolt and Lightning can wither most monsters out of ever being able to retaliate. Throw in an Ice Bomb or two to clean up and you've got an incredibly powerful anti-tank build on your hands. I wouldn't rely on Roar to beat speedy monsters, but on the off chance it does land, you're still in a really good position to clean up. Some monsters in Monster Rancher 2 have the dubious honor of being solved, wherein there is one optimal moveset, and straying from it is only ever done as a joke or to stick to a theme of some sort. Usually this is the case with monsters that have a small amount of text, but somehow Tiger has a few unique and significantly different use cases despite having very few techs. Tiger's basic power build is very to the point. If you expect your opponents to have speed, this is what your build would look like. Since the majority of monsters in the game can't competently invest into defense, this is the most popular option. Stab is still preferable to charge in my opinion, but you could get both if you wanted. Only forgo stab if your goal is to have no chance in winning when you eventually do run into a tank. If you think your opponent will mostly be tanks, you can let go of Roll Assault and double up on slot 3 with stab in combination. The reason you go for this is that with the significantly cheaper cost of combination, you can put up huge damage quicker than you can with repeated stabs, but stab will still allow you to bully speed monsters. Building is all about moderation to an extent, and making your monster too specialized is a recipe for disaster unless the tournament you're entering has some weird gimmick and you're preparing for it. Moreover, if you're going to fight tanks, you can handwave all of his power techs entirely and instead opt for his intelligence build. Your only real decision here, regardless of who your opponent is Roar vs Blizzard, as all the other three are necessary. You can get both if you want, but having a focus is usually better in the long run. Even if you got some dumb low offense build that focuses entirely on withering, you can still make use of Ice Bomb. Unless your offense is so low that you're not expecting to do any damage, but at that point there's no sense in theory crafting an optimal build since you've already gone out of your way to lose. Roar is very risky, and normally I'd go with Blizzard, but Blizzard is very much a medium low risk and medium low reward move, and it is drastically outclassed versus monsters who can't dodge, so it's one extreme or the other. You can choose to run either of these builds with speed or defense, as there are some pros and cons to both. The intelligence build benefits heavily from the increased withering that comes from anger, but may struggle to keep up in damage versus an opponent who's incapable of missing. You'll have to do your own risk assessment and figure out what works best for you. All in all, Tiger was buffed pretty significantly from his first iteration in Monster Rancher 1. He still suffers on average from low offensive prowess, but key techs and overarching theme of astronomical sharpness in his kit help patch up this weakness nicely. Within his archetype, he's outclassed by one or two monsters, but no one really goes ball to the wall on sharpness like Tiger does. So even outside of his generally solid placement in the meta, he's got the novelty of a promise of getting crits more often than not for him. He also has the key benefit of being one of the best tanks in the game, which is a great way to differentiate yourself in a meta where most monsters can't even run viable tank builds. So hey guys, I just want to say thanks again for watching another one of these videos. They are fun to make, but they are also very, very difficult and time consuming. This one was a lot shorter because, I didn't have 24 texts to go over, and I'm honestly thankful for that. I needed a break after that Zoom video. As always, if this isn't enough for you and you're interested in learning more about Monster Rancher, consider joining the Discord, consider watching my streams. We're always teaching, we're always learning new stuff. We just did the Oops All Zooms tournament, which was a lot of fun that I was talking about in my last video. And it turns out Intelligence Zoom in hard mode is actually really good. We didn't know that prior because not really anybody ran it. So there's still a lot of stuff to be discovered in this game, and every day is a new adventure. I do want to say thank you to everybody who's been subscribing lately. The numbers have been going up, so I just want you guys to know that it means a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.